Hello, bookish friends. My name is Gail, and I am the Fiction Bookworm. Today, I'm going to give you my best of 2019 books. I realize I'm actually not quite done with 2019 yet, but pretty close. So I don't think if I do read anything after this video, I'll just put it over into 2020 and it'll count for next year. So I have, I've already given you my top 5 historical fiction because that's the genre I read the most, and I want to share with you a number of other books that I've read this year in different genres that I really enjoyed. So I thought I'd start with a genre that I don't read a lot of, as you might guess, because I call myself the fiction bookworm, and that is nonfiction. And I did read a number of nonfiction books as I was looking through my list. I had decided that for 2020 I want to have a goal of reading 6 nonfiction books in the course of the year, which is maybe too low. I maybe should have set it a little bit higher. But looking at my list, just kind of glancing at it and seeing what nonfiction books I have on my list, I probably have at least 5 that I read in 2019. So I actually came close to meeting, if maybe even 6, I don't know. But it's somewhere in that neighborhood, and so it's quite possible that I could reach that goal. Some of the nonfiction that I read this year included In the Country We Love, A Family Divided by Diane Guerrero. I also read, started to read The Rent Collector, which was not a favorite of mine. I DNF'd that, by Cameron Wright. Everything Happens for a Reason, which is a memoir about living with cancer, by Kate Bowler. I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. That was very good. And let's see, Made, which is by Stephanie Land. Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. So I think that's like 5. And then I read part of Two in the Far North by Margaret Meary. I didn't finish that book. So it's pretty close to the 6. I'd say of all of those books, definitely the standout, my favorite nonfiction book that I read in 2019 was I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown. I highly recommend it, especially if you are a white person. I mean, particularly if you are a white person, I highly recommend you read it. It's a really good book. So that is my top nonfiction book for 2019. Now I want to move on to another genre that I don't read a lot of. I used to read a lot more of, but I think I've just had a really hard year and I haven't been able to read it as much. And that is like the mystery suspense category. So this year I read 4 books, I think, in the sort of mystery suspense gothic genre, if you stretch it to gothic. And those 4 books are State of Lies by Siri Mitchell, which I really liked. It was a kind of suspense about what happened to this woman's husband. And then I read, let's see, what's the other one? A gothic novel that I read was called House of Brides by Jane Cockrum. I also enjoyed that one. Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. And I would say I did really like all of them, actually. I think I rated all of them at least 3 stars and above. Much higher for some of the, for like Turn of the Key, I probably rated, I think, at least 4. At least that's what sticks out in my mind. State of Lies, I think, was about 4. And The Family Upstairs is one that I initially rated more like a 2.5 or 3. but it's one book that I just have not been able to stop thinking about. I think it was very well written. And I would actually say that even though I felt at the time like, okay, this isn't a book for me, that it was probably the best of the four that I read, because I just keep thinking about it. So I think that's probably my best of the mystery suspense category for the year, is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. So another category that I'm going to put on my list is contemporary, what might be classified as either women's fiction or romance. And I read a bunch of books in that category. I'm not going to list all of them. But I did read a bunch of good books. I'm going to mention a few that I thought were really kind of stand out and were in the running for my best one. So one of them was The Accidental Beauty Queen by Terry Wilson. That was really cute. It's a Jane Austen. Books play a big part in that. It's a very literary allusion novel. Harry Potter also gets a lot of mentions in that book. So it's just fun and it's cute. It was a very light read and it was just a lot of fun. Let's see, what else? The Virgin River novel by Robin Carr. A Royal Christmas Wish, which I just finished. Let's see, Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. I like that one. Royal Holiday by Jasmine Guillory. That's probably my runner-up for my favorite. I'm going to say, though, that my favorite one was a little bit more of a contemporary magical realism called The Book Charmer by Karen Hawkins, something like that. That one is set in a small town. It sort of revolves around a librarian who hears books tell her who needs to read the book. Although the main storyline was not actually the librarian, it was this woman who just moved back to the neighborhood with her mom who has dementia. So because I spent the past 2 years learning about dementia through my dad, and you know, understanding what that disease is about, I thought that was my favorite one. Because it was a cute story. It was a small town, rural setting, which I love, but also it really touched on something that was very deep in my life. So The Book Charmer by Karen Hawkins, and I know it's the beginning of a series. There's actually also a prequel novella. So I'm looking forward to there being more books in that series. I don't know anything about that, but I hope there will be. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. That was another really good sort of contemporary romance that I read. That would probably be my runner-up for second best, or maybe tie with Royal Holiday, I think. It was cute. It was a Jane Austen tribute novel, and I have a whole video where I talk about that book. So the next genre that I want to talk about is literary fiction, and I would say in my reading habits, if I'm reading literary fiction, it's mostly because we're reading it from my book club. And that's partially because when I come across the literary fiction genre books that I want to read, I usually suggest them for my book club, and they end up going on the list. So I would say this year, we read a few. One was called Silver Girl by Leslie Patrizik. We read The Immortalists by, who's that author? Chloe Benjamin. Neither one of those were ones that I really loved. I thought they were interesting. Yeah, they were interesting, but they weren't loves. So my absolute favorite novel for probably this year, and also the literary fiction pick of my favorite literary fiction novel for the year, was The Wedding by Dorothea West. And this is, you know, quite an older book. I think she published it in the mid-90s. It is the story of a young woman's wedding, and because Dorothea West was pretty famous for her short stories, this novel itself is made up of chapters that kind of could function as short stories. And I think that a number of the chapters were actually published independently in literary magazines or other magazines as well. So it's really good. It's about this African-American family and the wedding of their youngest daughter, and kind of how that sort of affects everyone in the family and shakes loose things that are going on. We learn about the whole history of the family. It's a family in which when the groom comes to visit, he meets the grandmother, who is the patriarch of the family, and she is a white woman. She grew up on a plantation where her family owned slaves, and her only daughter ended up marrying the son of one of the slave girls that she kind of grew up with on the plantation. But after she decided to marry this man, she realized, she did it, I think, because she was getting older and no man was interested in marrying her. And it was after the Civil War, so it wasn't that far. I mean, it was pretty far after the Civil War. Anyway, she had no men interested in her until this one young black man. And so he wanted to marry her and she agreed, and then she regretted it and kind of lived a life of depression afterwards. And so that whole thing really affects the family, for subsequent generations. So it was a really good book. So that was probably my favorite book for the year, was The Wedding by Dorothea West. The last genre that I'll talk about is fantasy and science fiction. I really read hardly any of that genre, and I think for this year, the only books that I read in that genre are probably the Discovery of Witches trilogy, which I read this year. I watched the TV show first and really liked it, and so I went ahead and read all of the books. I would have to say the third book, The Book of Life, the kind of final book in the trilogy, was my favorite of the trilogy. But the first book is really good. The TV show is also really good. It's a really great adaptation. I think they did a good job with it. So if you are interested in picking up a book series and a TV series, I do recommend The Discovery of Witches. So that wraps up my best of 2019. I will probably talk at the end of the year a little bit more about my reading life, my reading goals, and what my goals are for 2020. So that will be probably the week of New Year's or the end of this week sometime. But until then, this is my last Vlogmas, and I've enjoyed doing Vlogmas. I'm excited that I managed to get 12 in. That was my goal, was to do 12 Vlogmas podcasts, and I did manage to squeeze them all in just barely before Christmas. So that is a great goal for me to reach. I think it's increased my viewership a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And if you're still watching this, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your subscriptions. I appreciate your views. I hope that you learn about some great books through my podcast or through my vlog. And have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a Happy Holiday for any other holiday that you're celebrating. And I hope that you will enjoy reading for the rest of the year. Thanks.